Steven Universe Future may be over, but I still have some questions about that big bad who was lurking in the corner of the opening credits. I want to talk to you about what led to that monster's arrival, some potential character inspo, and what the heck even caused this guy's formation. What's up, guys? I'm Chris Carr. Let's take a closer look at the transformation Steven Quart's Cutie Pie DeMaio universe goes through at the end of Steven Universe Future. Before we dive in, I want to give a shout out to all of our donors on Patreon. Thanks to these gems, we get to keep the Steven Universe conversation going, even while our teeny tiny team of 4 has to work apart. We really appreciate you guys. If you want to pitch in, check out our Patreon page and see if a donation tier works for you. We'll thank you with shoutouts, patches, bloopers, and more. If you'd rather use your cash to grab some Steven Universe merch, I totally get ya. That TeePublic link is probably more your speed and will take you to a great selection of Steven Universe shirts. Lastly, I'm assuming you guys are all caught up on the series since you clicked a video about the finale, but you know what they say about making assumptions. So if you aren't caught up on Steven Universe Future, go do that. I'll be here when you're ready. On to Steven! Steven Universe, having brought peace to the galaxy, is unsure of what to do with himself now that the world doesn't need saving. The gems have lives, jobs, and seem to be thriving in this post-crisis world, and Steven's human friends seem to have their futures all figured out. Steven's lived his life in survival mode, and now that there's no real threats, he doesn't know how to handle anything. Everything he suppressed throughout his life starts creeping out, slowly at first, until he has full-blown pink outbursts. The more Steven tries to go it alone and push his feelings down, the worse it gets. He continues denying and suppressing his feelings, which leads to him physically harming others. When he admits to the things he's done, saying them out loud makes Steven think of himself as a monster, and he transforms into that final, ominous figure we've been seeing in the opening credits, a giant horned monster of a gem. Monsters' transformations to embody mental anguish isn't anything new. We've seen it in everything from Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde to the Incredible Hulk. Humans, once transformed, will give in to primal urges and violence. I've always found the Hulk's parallels to mental health and trauma fascinating. I think his transformations are actually a lot like Steven's. The ability for a hero to consistently get back up and go back and fight is what makes a hero a hero. We just often overlook the consequences guys like Bruce and Steven are forced to deal with. In Bruce's case, he isn't in control. In Steven's, he's becoming more and more out of control because he's never experienced this level of power or the intensity of these sorts of emotions. Discussing mental health has become more common in comics and comic-based media. Look at Tony Stark dealing with his PTSD and Thor with his depression. But Steven Universe takes it a step further by making Steven believe that his inability to just get over his traumatic experiences and thus lash out in hateful ways doesn't simply make him feel less than. It makes him feel like a literal monster. So the form he takes is that of a ginormous lizardy monstrosity. The form Steven takes seems to be that of a kaiju, really. Kaiju translates to strange creature. We're familiar with these from Japanese monster movies, and it's no surprise anime fan Rebecca Sugar would want to implement the use of one in the epic conclusion of her series. These monsters weren't always just beings of terror. Occasionally, they'd have neutral alignments, or would come to the aid of heroes, leaning more to the trope of being misunderstood creatures. Now, if we're to look at the word etymologically, kai means mysterious and unknown, and ju means beast. Steven's feelings are something that have been mysterious and emotions that were unknown to him, and frankly make him feel like a beast. How could anyone but a monster want to harm others or act out in the ways he has? The creatures that became the iconic kaiju we know today were often physically based on demons found in Japanese folklore. I think this physical representation of a demon works as a metaphor for Steven's inner demons that he's grappling with. If we were to look at the creature with a D&D lens, one could argue that Steven specifically becomes a Tarrasque, a gigantic lizard that only lives to eat, kill, and destroy. There's a striking physical resemblance between the two, both with 4-limbed claws, a long destructive tail, fangs, and horns. It's a creature with very low intelligence and has no ability to speak. The creature will lie dormant for years and then emerge, much like Steven's suppressed feelings. The mere sight of the creature causes beings with less than 3 levels or hit dice to become paralyzed with fear while it remains in their sight. This paralysis reminded me of when all the gems just looked onward at Steven with tears, unsure how to help him. That is until Connie's intervention. The beast has insane defensive stats and can regenerate from injuries. To possibly destroy it, you'd need to render its HP to -30 and cast Wish or Miracle over its remains. And what's a wish or miracle if not a group hug including White Diamond? Look at how uncomfortable this bee is. She's like, yes, there, stiff upper lip. Ugh, I'm touching peasants. Plus, most of the magical girl animes that Sugar drew inspo from did end in overcoming the odds through the power of friendship. Keeping all these feelings buried is a lot like keeping a beast at bay. Stephen chooses to view himself as a monster because he's only seen villains and corrupted gems act out the way he has. And so this self-loathing and disgust leads to Stephen's physical transformation. But the question is this a clear case of corruption or something else? If we are to subscribe to this being a corruption, then I think we need to look beyond the corrupting light and examine the corruption of Jasper. As a quick refresher, the corrupting light was a devastating attack against the crystal gems by the remaining members of the Diamond Authority, yellow, blue, and white. The attack was meant to wipe out all gems on Earth, and instead resulted in almost all the gems corrupting. With yellow's ability to alter a gem's physical form, blue's power of overriding a gem's emotions, and white's puppet master powers that allowed her to take over the bodies of gems, all three of these powers seemed to combine to warp a gem's body, mind, and emotions. Jasper was not corrupted by that light. Instead, she corrupted after a fusion. Keep in mind, Jasper wasn't the healthiest gem to begin with. She was under an insane amount of pressure from her superiors and showed worsening signs after fusing with Lapis. This was a move of pure desperation. It went against everything Jasper and Homeworld stood for. Fusing with a different gem cut was an abomination. While trapped as Malachite, Jasper was struggling 24/7 to be in control. Lapis, as we've seen time and time again in the series, is an extremely strong gem, if not the strongest. A little reminder, she was able to keep Steve Zilla at bay when no one else could, not even the Diamonds. She could hold her own against Jasper and was willing to once again be imprisoned after already spending years in isolation. Jasper was no match for someone that powerful, especially someone so mentally strong. And being trapped in that fusion for so long leads to this sort of Stockholm syndrome. Lapis and Jasper were in an abusive relationship, and Jasper craved the pain she felt when fused with Lapis. So she's thrown out her morality code, she's doomed to an eternity on this horrible human-riddled planet, and she's no longer a sought-after and respected warrior. Worse, her sworn enemy Rose Quartz, now Stephen, offered her aid. So we need to bear all that in mind when Jasper fuses with a corrupted gem, which leads to her becoming corrupted post-fusion. Garnet explains that corruption is like a tear in the fabric of one's mind. So in addition to fusing with a corrupted gem, you could argue that Jasper corrupted because of all the mental anguish she's under. No diamond beam needed here. With this understanding that corruption can come from psychological issues, one can argue that Stephen underwent a similar break, and that him becoming a giant monster was the result of corruption. After all, Stephen has been under serious emotional duress throughout Future. As was explained to him in the hospital, emotional trauma that isn't properly dealt with can manifest physically. And this seems to be a shared trait between gems and humans. In humans, your cortisol levels can rise, and in gems, your body can drastically change in shape, size, and eventually overall appearance. Corrupted gems typically become violent, unreasonable, and hostile, much like rabid animals. Stephen definitely exhibits this sort of behavior in his beast form. Furthermore, Stephen could have been healed not just by the embrace of his loved ones, but by the tears and essence of all four diamonds mixing into the ocean water around him. The go-to cure for corruption. Some viewers, however, believe this wasn't corruption at all, but rather Stephen's gem powers, this one being shapeshifting, getting thrown into a tizzy when combined with the emotional trials he's facing. He sees himself as a monster, so he physically shifts into the form of a monster. All of his hurt, his rage, his frustration burst out of him into this monstrosity because he couldn't hold all those feelings in any longer. In addition to the non-corruption argument, there's the idea that Stephen was healed essentially with a group hug. Now, I would argue that that stance is really reductive. It isn't just a group hug. It was the physical embodiment of his friends and family assuring him that they were there for him and that he could hurt around them, that they were there to comfort him and to listen to him. That tangible sense of relief and comfort, paired with the knowledge that Stephen was in ongoing therapy, made a lot of sense to me personally. He was allowing others to share in his feelings, share in this perceived burden, and allow himself to just submit to all these emotions he was feeling and come out better for it. It brought the number "this is a thought" to mind. This idea that recognizing your anxieties and emotions and allowing them to be felt and experienced is fine. And by doing so, you aren't controlled by those feelings. In fact, Rebecca Sugar has said that Stephen recognizing his trauma was key to him getting better. Said Sugar, quote, "It's helpful for Stephen to know where his behavior is coming from and where his illness is coming from. Becoming aware of the problem is necessary in order to address it. So that's the most important part to me. Stephen learning that what he went through as a child is impacting him in the present and has altered his body's response to stress can eventually help him recognize that response and take the steps he needs to feel safe and to heal." So there you have it. Part of Stephen becoming Stephen again was him addressing all his pain. And maybe he didn't heal thanks to diamond ores and spit. At the end of the day, I hope we all can take away the fact that even the most pure-hearted, intergalactic space saviors have inner demons and difficult emotions. It's okay to be unsure of where you're going and to be worried about your future. It's okay to be unsure of yourself. The key is to talk through those moments of uncertainty and personal struggle with people you love and trust. It's never a sign of weakness to ask for help. All your heroes do it too. Of course, these are just some points when it comes to Steven's beast mode and Steven Universe future. What do you think caused him to take this shape? Corruption? Shapeshifting? Onion? Let me know your hot takes in the comments below. Thanks again to all of our donors on Patreon, to TeePublic, and to all of you amazing Steven Universe fans. For more videos, just click to the left. Thanks for watching, y'all. See you, Space Cowboy.